Well, the simple fact is, if you're only relying on steps as cardio in a contest prep, you're not going to get peeled. In order to get to that stage lean level of conditioning, you're going to have to do cardio.
Upper-lower splits have been the talk of the town for the past year. And for this past year, you guys have begged me to make an upper-lower training program. Some say this is the best split to ever exist. Would I say that? Not necessarily. I wouldn't say any split is the best split to exist, because I understand nuance. But after a lot of thought and procrastination, I finally present to you the upper-lower training program, a high-frequency approach by none other than myself, Sebastian Burka. This program is available now. If you are interested, you can get it at sebastianburka.com.
There is exercise variations outlined within the program here so that you have more flexibility within your training, meaning you can do things that you want to do. You can rotate. You can alternate movements if you would like to on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. You can do things if you don't have access to certain pieces of equipment. You have variations in there that you probably do have access to. So there's more flexibility within there, and it ultimately just makes things a lot easier for you and gives you more control. There's also flexibility within the volume as well. You can titrate up if you'd like to. You can reduce volume from other muscle groups and you can add it to others so that you could prioritize weak points if that's something of interest to you. So there's a lot of flexibility within this program, which is the way that I like to program, because it gives you more control and lets you make more decisions so that you can get the results that you really want. Again, it is available now, and if it is of interest to you, check it out. Anyways, today's episode is going to be about cardio and all the misinformation that goes around it, which is actually, it's pretty fucking crazy. I made a few videos over the past couple weeks here, and I was absolutely in disbelief at the responses that it got and the way that people have reacted to this information, which I thought was honestly common sense. You don't really even need to know that much about fitness to understand these things, but seeing how many people do not understand this stuff, I thought it was absolutely crucial to make a podcast on this topic. So that's what me and Adam are going to get into here. Cardio, high intensity interval training, fasted cardio. What is the difference between NEAT, getting steps in, non-exercise activity thermogenesis versus actual cardio, and why it is important to understand the difference between those two and how it affects your progress. So stick around if you want to learn something, or maybe you'll just hear things that you already knew. But if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. I do appreciate the support, and drop a comment down below if you have any questions, any feedback, or anybody you want to see come on the podcast. Let's get into it. You ready?
Trying to figure out a fucking caption,
For what?
or just at least an emoji. I want to say chipping away.
For what? What is the post?
It's just going to be just that.
It's getting dirty.
Shit's getting dirty. I'm going to save that for when I'm all vascular, showing
Full
off.
body freak mode. I haven't even started my full body era.
I haven't even trained upper lower yet. People are talking about that's
I just dropped an upper lower program.
I know.
The upper-lower training program, a high-frequency approach.
Did you hear Kanye's new song?
Uh-uh.
Let me play it real quick.
Okay.
Cardio. A lot of controversy about cardio.
Yeah. I'm doing a lot of it.
How much are you doing right now?
A lot. I'm doing about an hour per day. Depends on the day.
So you like to break it up in this very complicated way.
Because I can, and it's what I've found to be best for me. I wouldn't tell a client to do what I'm doing, but it's because I'm coaching myself that it just makes sense.
Do you think you have ADHD?
Oh, yeah.
See, I know I have ADHD, and when you start explaining the way that you do cardio to me, I could feel my ADHD taking over.
I also have always had OCD. Like my doctor told me when I was a little kid, like 5 years old, he told my dad that he thinks I have OCD. In my entire life, I've always known that, like, to some extent, not to where it's like ruining my life, but like there's certain things where like in my brain, certain things have to be a certain way.
Autism.
There's a little bit of that in there too. Yeah.
Explain how you structure your cardio.
Okay. So it's based on my training split. So my training split,
Mind you, this is also you in prep.
yeah, I'm 13 weeks out now. So this is what I've been doing the whole prep. So I've been doing 3 days on, 1 day off, 3 days on, 1 day off. And the way I designed my training split is based on my recovery, based on my needs. So I'm training in that 8-day split. I'm training legs twice. And so because I'm also trying to bring my legs up, or at least, not lose my leg size, I'm also trying to prioritize recovery. So that's the idea with surrounding my cardio around the training split. So basically what I do is the first 2 days of the split are upper body days. So I do a pull day and then a push day basically. And then those 2 days I'm doing Stairmaster, 40 minutes fasted. I walk to the gym, 25-minute walk to the gym, do 40 minutes on the stairs, 25-minute walk back. Then I eat 3 meals, I train, and then I do 20 minutes on the incline treadmill. So it's an hour of cardio for those 2 days. Then the third day is leg day.
Walk that back.
Okay.
So you, on your leg days.
On my leg days now? Those
What did you just say?
the 2 upper body days.
Two upper body days.
It goes, my split is pull, push, legs,
Yes.
rest. And then it's another 2 upper body days. It's arms, shoulders, legs, rest. So 2 upper, legs, rest, 2 upper,
And
legs,
we're only
rest.
talking about those 2 upper days right now.
Yeah, so the 2 upper days, I'm doing Stairmaster, fasted.
45.
40.
40.
40, yeah.
And then post-workout.
Post-workout, an extra 20 minutes. So yeah, I'm doing
And
an
then
hour.
walking.
Yeah, incline, yeah. Not like crazy hard, but just like, more than a walk, not
Okay.
neat.
You know, lay out the other days.
So then leg day, I don't do fasted cardio. I don't want to deplete any more glycogen from my legs that day. So I go on a long walk. So I'll go for like a hour to hour and a half long walk just to get steps in. Just because I keep my step count, relatively the same every day.
So on that day, when you do like the leg day where you're not doing fast cardio, is your NEAT staying the same? Your baseline steps are the same? You're just doing more of it in that morning?
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm also, I'm not doing the incline treadmill post-workout. That's why. So the reason why I added in the incline treadmill at first was just because I was getting 8,000 steps per day and I wanted to bump it to 10,000, and doing 20 minutes on the incline treadmill, just walking, added 2,000 steps. And I was like, well, could turn this into a little bit more cardio. So now it's more like a moderate intensity cardio instead of just steps. So then, yeah, leg day, I just go on a long walk in the morning, eat 3 meals, and then just made a change this week per your suggestion. What I've been doing is just that steps, leg day. But on one of those leg days, so every 8 days on my quad day, which was yesterday, now I'm doing 20 minutes of HIIT cardio, high intensity interval training cardio, on the assault bike. So that was the first time I did it yesterday, and went pretty well. I lost 4 pounds since yesterday, sweating a bunch. So that's just once a week or once every 8 days.
That's the only day where you're doing high intensity interval training.
Yeah. So
I will say I got that from Phil initially. Phil is a big proponent. Is proponent the right word? Advocate?
Yeah,
Is the right
both.
word? Yeah.
Proponent of it. Yeah, I assumed that. And then my hamstring day, I don't do any cardio. And then my rest day, so that's day 4 in the split and day 8 in the split. My legs are always beat up from training legs, and I've just found that my output is not the same if I'm doing Stairmaster, at least how it's been. If I'm doing Stairmaster the next morning after training legs the night before. So just for now, what I've been doing is, because I've also been making great progress doing this, I just do incline treadmill, 45 minutes fasted on my rest days, the day after leg day, which also helps with the recovery aspect, which is also why I do it. And then later in the day, I just go on a longer walk in the evening to get the steps in. So it's, it sounds confusing, sounds convoluted and all over the place, but it's, it's strategically thought out to where I can, have
Did
as
you
much.
even talk about the arm days and the shoulder days?
It's the same as the chest and back days. So it just repeats itself cardio wise. So
Upper days.
upper body days, basically. Yeah.
It's
So
4
it's
times
four times every 8 days. I'm doing stairs. Yeah. And
out
then
of the entire split.
yeah, so out of the entire 8-day split, 4 days are stairs, 2 days are just treadmill. 1 day is post-workout hit, and then 1 day is no cardio.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, see, it sounds very complicated.
Right, and like I wouldn't just tell a client to do this, but like I've built up to this,
Yeah.
and it's been working. It works great for me, and I might continue to make changes over time, but that's just what works best for me right now.
Do you think you're going to standardize it as you get closer to show?
Most likely what I'll do is, at least my plan, which it still might change, I might add more days of Stairmaster. So instead of doing incline treadmill on rest days, I might switch that to Stairmaster and just not be a bitch. Because the first part of this prep, I was also rebuilding size because I took a couple months off of training before prep, which is not what I would recommend for anybody to do, but it's how it went.
That's what I did.
Yeah, well, it's not the best way to do it. It's the Kevin Lavroni effect, but I rebuilt my size.
Effect.
My legs definitely got a lot bigger and fuller since before I started prep till now. So it worked. Prioritizing my leg training and recovery worked. So I might throw in Stairmaster the day after leg day and just have it to where it's like, Stairmaster every day except leg day. But ideally, I can get peeled early and just be ready, 4 weeks out or however many weeks out. And then I can switch out Stairmaster for more incline treadmill as I get closer to the show so that I can fill my legs back out, reduce fatigue. That's
Fill
the
your legs
plan.
back out with the Stairmaster.
By removing the Stairmaster, just because Stairmaster, I'm using more glycogen in my quads.
See, this is interesting now because there are people who will do a lot of Stairmaster and lose. They'll atrophy as a byproduct of that. I guess they just can't recover from the amount of fatigue that it produces, which I guess is all relative to like their food intake, genetics. But I know that when I was in prep, I did the recumbent bike, and the recumbent bike is very hard on your quads. Like you get crazy pumping your quads.
Definitely.
But in both the preps that I did that, I felt like that kept my quads fuller, and like my legs never atrophied.
I think it depends on how big of a deficit you're in. If you're not in that big of a deficit, then you're not going to get that flat. So you're going to have that glycogen supercompensation, and you're going to have a reason to be storing more glycogen in your quads, which is, the myth that, the pump only causes sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and has zero other effects.
Well, they say that we can't train for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy.
And it's the simple fact that if you're, doing something to get a crazy pump consistently, you're probably going to just store more glycogen in that muscle versus only doing low volume, and never doing anything that gets a pump. Whether that can directly contributes to muscle fiber hypertrophy.
I think that's where a lot of confusion is. Do we even have data on this? I don't think we have exact data on this.
Especially on bodybuilders, absolutely not.
No, but I mean, if you just think about it logically, right? It's another adaptation that occurs, right? If you constantly are forcing yourself to get a pump, you're going to want to store more glycogen in that area, which is going to create that fuller look. You're going to be able to get a lot more filled out. That's why you see a powerlifter will never get that filled out. They'll never have that. I mean, there's obviously more factors to it than that, but it is
it's anecdotal.
I mean, if you just look at it through any logical
it's common sense. People are going to say it's bro science, and because there's no study that can prove it, it must be not true, right? But we can literally look at different, Olympia level competitors and top level pros and see the way that they train and see that they have a more bubbly look, which again, like it sounds like it's just bro science, but like this is all the science we have when it comes to, Olympians. Like there's no studies being done on them. So we have to look at the studies, which are the reality. And that's going to be, how do they train? How do they look? Obviously genetics play a huge role, but I do think that training lower volume and heavier may,
I mean, I think it has its place in terms of, like, if you're worried about fatigue, obviously, like, we can make the arguments that there wouldn't be much of a difference in terms of actual myofibril hypertrophy, but, that's not all bodybuilding comes down to, because bodybuilding is all a look, an illusion, too.
Yeah, definitely.
How well can you fill out? How can you position yourself? How can you pose?
Right, but I do think that this is my main argument towards people who say to avoid the pump, to avoid high rep training, is it's a tool in your tool belt that you could utilize that could have benefits that we just don't know about, which I say I know about, but I'm gonna say nobody really actually scientifically knows. Can't prove it, I should say. But what if there is a benefit and you've just been holding yourself back for 10 years until there's finally a study done on professional bodybuilders that show, oh, the muscle actually does store more glycogen when you train in higher rep ranges, which allows you to have a fuller look, allows you to improve insulin sensitivity because you're able to uptake more nutrients into the muscle at a time, and therefore have less body fat accumulation during your bulking phases, and therefore you're having a more effective contest prep and you're overall a better bodybuilder. It all, comes together in the big picture. But if you're looking at such the smallest little thing of like, well, if I do 12 reps on this set, that's more fatigue than 6 reps because it's more reps. And what are the first few reps of the set doing that I can't get out of blah, 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 blah. It's like, just be a fucking bodybuilder. Train like a bodybuilder. That's how you're going to be a good bodybuilder, not over analyzing it.
I don't disagree with you, but I mean, obviously, you know what they're going to say. You know what their response is. That's bro science. A lot of bodybuilders get big in spite of what they do, not because of what they did, blah, 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 which is all true, but they just use that as justifications to kind of like disregard everything, which doesn't, it's not an intelligent approach at all. And they look at things through a very narrow scope. They're very one-track minded, and they miss a lot of the stuff that also goes into it just because they're only focused on the fatigue minimization, what is actually going to produce this, the best results if we try to do some mathematical equation in terms of myofibril hypertrophy and minimizing this, and then we're only how fast can we progressively overload because that's what's going to drive it more. It's like they just miss other parts of it. Mm-hmm. Same thing, which we obviously see with nutrition as well, but we're honestly like, this is not even the point of this podcast. We should be talking about cardio. Cardio. Nobody understands cardio, which is crazy. You saw all those videos I posted.
Yeah, talking about NEAT versus cardio.
The amount of misinformation and general confusion that people have surrounding cardio was very surprising to me. Mm-hmm. It's kind of crazy. People think that, like you said, you're getting more steps in, trying to have a baseline of NEAT. That's the same thing as doing actual cardio that it's going to produce the same result. It's all about I don't even know how to word it because the shit that they say really doesn't make any fucking sense. Where do we start with this?
Well, the simple fact is, if you're only relying on steps as cardio in a contest prep, you're not going to get peeled. In order to get to that stage lean level of conditioning, you're going to have to do cardio. Now, do you have to do 2 hours of the Stairmaster every single day? Probably not. But do you have to push yourself hard and actually get into those higher levels of heart rate, burning more calories at a time? I do think that, it's basically, I don't want to say impossible because anything is possible, but it's a lot more practical to simply just do cardio, not spend hours and hours and hours walking 20,000, 30,000 steps every single day just to burn the same amount of calories. There's the theory behind it where lower intensity activity is going to use more triglycerides for producing ATP. That's great. And I think that's why we should be doing more steps for caloric expenditure, but only relying on steps and completely disregarding cardio because we can get all the calorie expenditure from only steps. I think that could only really apply to someone either starting a cut or someone who's just doing, a weight loss transformation, trying to get from 400 to 300 pounds. Sure, they could just do steps, but you're probably going to make a lot faster progress if you start doing actual cardio.
Okay, we got to take this back to the root square one.
Like, what is cardio?
What is cardio and what is steps? Because this apparently people think they're the same fucking thing, right? And I've explained this multiple times before. Cardio, you can do forms of cardio where you are getting steps. You can do pace walks. You can get on a Stairmaster. Those are going to be steps that are taken into account for your daily step count, which is not even what I do, but just in general, those would be a part of the daily steps you're getting. But the daily steps that you get also include everything you do from just walking around. I'm walking to my car, walking around the grocery store. Say I try to make more effort to get higher step count in, so I park further away from the store. Maybe I walk around the block a couple times. Like, that is not the same thing as doing cardio, because cardio is exercise, and it all comes down to intensity and effort that is given. So the only way that somebody actually just walking around would be cardio is if they're morbidly obese, and it takes a lot of effort for them to just fucking move.
100%. I agree. Yeah. But if you're walking, 15, 20, 30 minutes, your heart rate's going to be more elevated than if you're sitting down. But that doesn't mean that I would consider that actual cardio just because your heart rate is elevated. Now, it goes to that exact point of like, well, if your heart rate's getting up to, 140 beats per minute just from going on a walk, you could consider that cardio, but also you probably have really bad cardiovascular endurance and probably cardiovascular health. So, for that example where someone's morbidly obese and they're having to move 400 pounds of their own body weight, yeah, you can consider that cardio. But for an average person,
Yeah, well, I just think it's important to be able to distinguish the difference between NEAT, non-exercise activity thermogenesis versus actual exercise and cardio, because they're not gonna just NEAT, just walking around is not going to utilize as much energy. You're not going to burn as many calories. So people who have like more active jobs, right? A lot of people work in hospitals, or when they work in the city, they have to walk around a lot. They're more active. If you work, I don't know, manual labor is a little bit different, but you also acclimate to that, right? So it really all comes down to the amount of effort that is needed to perform the task. If you work at a hospital, or you work somewhere where you're walking around, you work at a restaurant, just because you're moving around constantly doesn't mean that is designated cardio, right?
Right.
That is just NEAT. Right? So then you go to the gym and you do a paced walk on the incline treadmill for 3 miles per hour, and you do that for 30 minutes, and now your heart rate is fucking booming. That is cardio.
Yeah. I think it also comes down to, just semantics of, technically, if you're a server and you're having to walk really fast from this table to that table to that table, you're not calling that cardio because you're just working, but in a way, you're moving at a fast pace. That's, some level of exercise. And then on the other hand, if you're just going out for a walk with your dog and you're walking at a very slow pace, just casually walk in the park, I wouldn't consider that cardio. That's just, walking, steps, NEAT, whatever you want to call it. But if you're intentionally walking at a fast pace, like you're fast walking for the intent of raising your heart rate, I think it's a low level of cardio, depending on how difficult that actually is for you. If you have very good cardiovascular endurance, that probably isn't going to be cardio. At least, what I mean by that is elevating your heart rate enough to where it would be considered cardiovascular exercise.
Yeah. Well, again, like you said, it's semantics. It's just important to be able to distinguish these things because it gives you more control over the variables when you're trying to understand why your weight not be moving or how it's moving in a certain manner. Like understanding how much of your daily steps are actually coming from you just moving around and doing your normal activities, and how much of that would actually be cardio. And what I do, I don't know if you do this too, is I would separate them for clients and have, this is your actual designated daily step count that I want you to do outside of the regimented program cardio that we have if you're doing that. Yep. So that those steps aren't being allocated for that, so we can keep those two variables separate and account for that, know that this is the baseline of NEAT, and then we're doing this on top of that, which is obviously going to utilize a lot more energy in a shorter time frame. But it all comes back down to effort again. Is somebody who's serving and is morbidly obese, maybe that is cardio for them if they're just fucking moving around and they're literally sweating their balls off, which probably wouldn't even be feasible for that type of person. No person on my 600-pound life is going to go work at a restaurant and serve and be on their feet all day. But
it's cardio for them. Too hard.
What was I going to say? It's like the arguments that I've had about this, I don't even know what they're trying to say. Like, because like you said, it's all about intent, right? And I mentioned that too, and somebody had mentioned that, so if I decide to go on a walk and now my intention is that it's cardio, that's what makes it cardio now versus me just walking. It's like, yes, because now you're going to give more effort during that session. It's like, if I just sit here and I start picking shit up around my house, am I at the gym training just because I'm picking shit up? Like, I'm going to the gym and doing an actual mode of exercise, just like cardio. I'm going with the intention of doing something for that intended goal. I'm going to the gym to train for hypertrophy.
I think for somebody who has that low level of cardiovascular endurance, going on a fast walk might be considered cardio for them. It's obviously also steps, but it's the reason why I think it's important is to just distinguish between step count and cardio so that you're able to track the variables and you're able to increase your cardio or increase your steps or, at least keep something consistent. So the way that I would look at it for, one of my clients would be, let's just keep your step count consistent and then raise cardio, or vice versa. Let's keep cardio where it is and let's raise your step counts just so we know what's what. And I'm not going to tell them to call their incline treadmill, steps, even though they are getting step count in. That's intentional cardio. But that just comes down to also either not wearing or not holding your phone while you're doing cardio, or not wearing your watch to track your steps while you're doing cardio, because then it's just going to be counted in there.
Or you'd have to check at the beginning and check at the end, and then subtract that from the
You could do
daily
that
goal,
too.
so you know how much it is. But
Yeah.
again, this is important because it's the variables, and we know that we have a baseline of say 8 to 10,000 steps a day. So we know that we also it's impossible to track energy expenditure accurately. So
Right.
I also got a lot of questions about that, and that's not something that we can do, right? So we're just
No.
assuming that 8 to 10,000 steps a day for this person is expending X amount of energy on average. This is their food intake relative to that. And now we have them doing X amount of cardio, where we know that we're giving them, stay within this designated heart rate zone. It should be a good amount of effort. It shouldn't be like you're able to hold a full conversation easily, but it shouldn't be like you're out of breath panting either. It should be a decent amount of effort. So that's also going to be relative to the individual, whether they need to increase the intensity, switch to a different mode, which all can come into with the other factors of like fatigue management with like doing stairs and the treadmill and the other apparatuses that you can utilize. But it's just having more control of those variables to know where to pull and where to add from. So because when you're doing designated cardio, we're obviously going to be accounting for much more energy expenditure coming solely from that.
Right. If I were to tell a client to, add in 30 minutes of cardio, and they think that going on a walk is considered cardio because it's more exercise than sitting on the couch, they're going to be burning a lot less calories from that 30 minutes of walking versus 30 minutes on the stairs. So if they're taking my, which I would be specific and say, I want you to be doing this amount of Stairmaster, or this amount of incline treadmill, or whatever it is. But, if you're coaching yourself, for example, and you think that step count is the same as cardio, or going on a walk is the same as just cardio in general, all cardio is the same, you're not going, and this is the problem with it, is you're not going to actually get lean enough for a show. You're not going to be getting, you're not going to have enough time to get lean for a show, just because you're going to be spending so much time in the day walking that it's going to take for you forever to actually burn the amount of calories that you can burn from simply just doing cardio at a higher heart rate, a higher calorie output. And that's why just cardio is more efficient. But I think I saw one video where some guy was replying to you, and he said, why would you tell somebody that steps are bad?
People took everything I said out of context. I had people with hundreds of thousands of followers take what I said out of context when it was explained in the caption. You saw that? It was,
Yeah.
I don't even know. This is what I say. I say steps, non-exercise activity thermogenesis is not the same as cardio. And the replies are, why are you telling people not to go on walks? How is walking not cardio? How is walking on a treadmill different from walking outside? Why are you telling people to not move? Like literally none of these things were ever stated. And somehow that's what people gather from me saying that, when I'm just saying that there is a difference and you need to understand the difference so you have more control over the variables and you can optimize your progress.
That's crazy. Exactly.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But people want to be victimized about everything. How can I make this about me?
Exactly.
I lost 40,000 pounds. I lost 40 pounds by walking 15,000 steps a day. Like, cool. That I never said that is not possible. Nobody said that you can't do that. I'm saying there's a difference between what you did versus if you got on the Stairmaster for an hour.
Right.
Those are two different things.
I think the main point of having a step count is just so that when you start to get tired in a calorie deficit, you're not getting lazier and burning less calories.
Yes.
So keeping your step count consistent at whatever number that is, 8, 10, 12, 15,000 per day, you're keeping that level of easy calorie expenditure consistent, rather than only relying on cardio. For example, if you only are doing cardio and don't know what your step count is at all, then your non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or your step count, is naturally going to decrease without you even realizing it. And then you're going to wonder, why are you hitting a plateau? And it's because you're not burning as many calories. Even though you're doing the same amount of cardio, you're walking less, you're moving less. So that's a huge benefit of knowing how many steps you're getting. But everybody has their own strategies. I personally wouldn't continue to push step count higher and higher and higher, because I do think there's a huge element of fatigue that comes with, going from 15,000 steps to 20,000 steps every single day, versus adding in an extra, the caloric equivalent of, maybe that's, an extra 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, on the Stairmaster either every day, 5 days a week, whatever it is, you can get a lot more done in a shorter period of time, which I think would have a lot less fatigue to do a few extra minutes on the Stairmaster versus an extra 5,000 steps of cardio.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to still have enough steps that you're still covering the baselines of getting enough steps in order to keep your caloric expenditure up without having to do so much extra cardio, because these extremes of doing a lot of cardio, a lot of steps, that's what's really going to cause a lot of fatigue versus spreading that caloric expenditure out, you know, a little bit here, a little bit there, you know, a little bit with Stairmaster, a little bit with step count. And that's going to, in theory, result in a little bit less fatigue than if you were to just do a shit ton of one of those.
The goal is to have the least amount of stress on the body.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the goal. People will make the argument that it's just, like you said, cardio is more efficient at getting this energy expenditure in a shorter time frame. Yes. I think people are also under the impression that there is like some universal caloric or energy expenditure number that comes with a step or a given amount of cardio, a given amount of duration that you're doing cardio, which again isn't the case because it's all individual dependent. There's no way to accurately track any of this outside of like a super controlled lab setting as far as I'm aware. Like all those things on machines are extremely inaccurate, and they'll vary. If you go from one treadmill to a different company's treadmill to one Stairmaster to another, you're going to see varying numbers, but there's not this universal number where if I walk 10,000 steps, it's going to burn X amount of calories, or if I do X amount of running, it's going to burn X amount of calories. So people think, well, I can just walk more and get the same results as if I did more cardio, which could be true, but it's also, there's no way of knowing that. And either way, there's no way you would really be able to walk as much and get a step count just from moving around more as high as you would need to equate to what you would theoretically be able to get out of doing, you know, I don't know, let's just say like even 2 hours of cardio. Like you would never be able to burn as much calories from walking more throughout the day as you would from being on the Stairmaster, maintaining a heart rate of like 150 beats per minute for 2 hours. That would be an insane amount of movement that I don't think any individual will probably be able to do, but also like it's all individual dependent as well. It all comes down to effort. Like how hard is it for you to move? How hard is it for you to do that cardio? You know, people who run more are going to burn less energy than somebody who doesn't run as much, just due to the adaptations that they have in their cardiovascular endurance. So
that's also true.
It just all depends. It's like not like you can. People try to do this mathematical equation in their head, and that's not how it actually works in application. You can't do that.
Right. I think the counter argument to when could you do, you know, only steps is at the beginning of a cut, where you don't need to be burning that many calories to, you know, start your cut, where it's pretty easy to just pull your food down a little bit and then establish a level of NEAT. You don't necessarily even need to do cardio. Sure, will it speed up your progress? And is it a good idea because you're at less risk for muscle loss at the start of the cut? Absolutely. But do you need to in order to see progress? No. So I think that would be a good time to where you can.
I have people do cardio year round.
I think it's great. I'm saying for people who are, you know, trying to do the least amount of stuff, the easiest way possible. I personally think cardio has a tremendous amount of benefits, heart health, you know, benefits for your training, all these things. But for somebody who's lazy.
Somebody who's lazy.
Yes. I think
lazy fucks.
If you aren't doing cardio, or let's say, you know, you're lazy and you're, you know, naturally very lean and you just don't feel like you need to do cardio.
Or for somebody who is
fast metabolism is going to help their appetite. You know, it's so.
You're saying that nobody can get lean without cardio, which I don't think is necessarily true. There are exceptions to every rule, which people will bring into.
Yeah, some people don't have to do cardio during contest
Some people
prep.
can get ready just with steps, but those are people who have very fast metabolisms. They're
exactly
very lean. Like somebody like Jesse could probably get away with the prep with really just doing a step count.
But he's starting his contest prep at 10% body fat.
Yeah,
and he only has to diet down for 12,000 or for 12 weeks, and so he could simply probably just do, you know, 12,000 steps per day and eat, you know, 2,000, 2,500 calories, and that's a huge deficit for him, and he would just, you know, get shredded. So for somebody like that with fast metabolism and already very lean,
it's possible. But Jesse also did do cardio during his prep as well. He did the Stairmaster.
Yeah, we were both next to each other doing the Stairmaster, busting ass on it, and so that's also. And he specifically credits the reason why he was so shredded for that show was because he was busting ass on the treadmill. Not even
the Stairmaster.
Stairmaster, yeah, Stairmaster.
Always fucking talks about the fucking
I know.
Gotta do the fucking Stairmaster.
And it's because I think there's I think the science and theory can disagree with that, but I think in reality, you know, you're going to be able to burn a certain amount of calories in general, not just talking about body fat versus glycogen, but the amount of calories that you can burn from just literally busting ass on a treadmill, going at, you know, I don't think heart rate necessarily matters too much just because that does adapt as you get better at cardio, but simply just going very hard for a shorter period of time in that cardio session, you know, whether that's, you know, 10, 20, 30 minutes of, you know, the whole, you know, 30, 40, 50-minute cardio session if you're doing that. Once you get to that point where you're really trying to get to that lean level of body fat, that's basically what got our friend pretty shredded for his show, and that's what he credited to. I don't think that's the only way to do it, but do I think that it's feasible or realistic in most applications to only do steps to get to you know 4% body fat? I think you're going to have to find a way to just burn more calories in a shorter period of time, and that's going to come from pushing cardio hard to get to that extra lean level of body fat. But to get shredded, you could theoretically just do, you know, steps. You probably should do some sort of cardio. It's going to make it way easier.
I would say most people, I mean, I have worked with hundreds and hundreds of people. Most people still need, the majority of people will pretty much always need to do cardio when you take into their lifestyle into account, their job, the amount of time they actually have to allocate to this shit, like where they live. Because people who live in the middle of nowhere too, like getting steps in is not the same as if you live in an urban area. Like people aren't going out and walking around on the fucking highway.
Or based on your job.
They just don't have, I don't want to say they don't have the accessibility to go out and walk more, but it's a lot more convenient to walk if you're in an area like this, where we could go to, you know, Hyde Park or something and we could, you know, spend the day out, versus when you live in the middle of fucking nowhere and like you really are very isolated. Did you bring your meal?
No.
What is your next meal?
You said what or when?
What is it?
I mean, I could either eat chicken and rice or cream of rice with protein powder.
How much chicken and rice?
It's 180 grams of chicken and 150 grams of rice and vegetables.
Do you want her to make it?
Sure. That'd be sick.
Let's see if she can make it.
I was just going to wait until I got back home and eat 2 meals at once.
Eat 2 meals?
Eat one and then wait like 30 minutes and then eat the next one and then train. But I mean, if she wants to cook, that'd be great.
Do we have enough chicken for Adam? No, we'll be done somewhat soon, but he needs 180 grams of chicken and 150 grams of rice. Just cook it and measure it out in grams. What is that? 6 ounces, 180 grams? Or is that?
I think it's 6.
It's like 6 ounces, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about 6 ounces cooked. 150 grams.
If you got any vegetables.
Do we have vegetables? Asparagus. How much is asparagus?
100 grams.
100 grams of asparagus. Yep. Okay, thanks.
Sick. Appreciate
She'll
it.
make it.
Hell yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we could also, we're not even talking about in a prep setting, you know, fasted cardio and the enhanced effect we could have on lipolysis and everything that goes into that as well. But yeah, in a general sense, most people are going to need to do cardio to get their goals accomplished at the end of the day. Like, there's also the argument of people just constantly wanting to pull food down lower. Why can't I just eat less and not do cardio? And people like to entirely disregard thyroid function, down regulation.
100%.
People don't seem to think it's a fucking thing until they're eating 1,500 calories and shit stops moving.
But also the effect on your training.
Yeah.
I would much rather add in a little bit of cardio rather than eat a tiny bit of food, because not only is the little bit of cardio going to help your training, but also eating more food while doing that little bit of cardio is also going to give you more fuel and glycogen for your workouts versus just pulling food. Our bodies are not a calculation. It's not just numbers where you just plug in a certain number and then it has this exact outcome. The human body obviously is so complex. Physiology is so complex that there's so many things that happen when you make small little changes. I have a million examples that come to mind, you know, just by saying that, like sodium, which is completely off track. But, you know, if you increase sodium versus decrease sodium, it doesn't just have one effect. Like, there's so many things that happen. Same with drinking water. So I think if you were to, I don't even know where I was going with that.
ADHD, full effect.
I know.
Kicked in. Need Adderall.
I know. I think I'm gonna start. Gonna start talking about fucking sodium and water out of
Adderall also helps. So Adderall will help you. I mean, I don't know if it works in the case of people who don't have ADHD, but if you are able to release more norepinephrine, and then you take something like yohimbine, which is going to block the alpha
2 receptors.
Alpha 2 receptors, then you would have an even greater effect on lipolysis, would you not? Adderall, clenbuterol, yohimbine, T3, which caffeine, blood pressure will be through the roof, heart rate will be insanely high, probably terrible for you health wise, but
also taking 40 milligrams of telmisartan, or however much it takes for me to have 120/80 or lower blood pressure. Depending on my resting heart rate, could take Nebivolol or propanolol or something like that, but I'm not too opposed to having a slightly elevated heart rate for a few weeks if it means I'm feeling better. If I'm for I guess 12 weeks.
Yeah. 12 weeks, 3 months.
Yeah.
Quarter of the year.
I could get a beta receptor blocker.
Food, I always my thought process when it comes to the food and cardio is I always pretty much want to keep food as high as I can.
Yeah.
And I'll do more cardio. I don't want, there's like to an extent of it, like there's balance, right? I'm not going to be doing a fucking hour cardio just to keep my food at 3,000 calories, right? I'm pretty much always starting at a base of like 25, 30 minutes, regardless, just transitioning from an off season as the majority of my clients would. And then we'll keep cardio there, just keep it where it's at, have the designated NEAT daily step count outside of that designated cardio, and then we'll drop food down. We'll see what happens depending on how much the person and how much I drop their food down. The next move from there might be to continue dropping food down, or it might be increase cardio by 5 or 10 minutes, see what happens. But I really don't like to keep cardio sessions. I don't like to bring cardio sessions higher than 45 minutes each unless we really need to. Once I get to past 45 minutes in a session, I'm going to add an additional session.
Yep.
Which could be just another low, moderate intensity steady state session, a post workout, or it could be a high intensity interval session as well, just depending on the context. And maybe it could be due to just time structure, what that person has available to them. It could be due to how much food they're eating as well. Does this make sense? Do they have enough food to the point where this makes more sense to utilize at this point in time rather than having them do another 30 minutes? Right now, we could just do 10 minutes of this. But I'm almost always trying to opt for cardio going up first to a certain point before I want to bring food down.
Yeah. For me, the way I look at it is what's easiest. What's going to be the least amount of fatigue that comes with it, or what's the lowest hanging fruit?
Yeah.
So generally it's going to be, let's start out with some cardio or bumping up the cardio a little bit. And then as we go, we'll shimmy it down. We'll pull some food, we'll add some cardio or add some steps, because like we said at the beginning, steps and cardio, I would consider to be different variables to manipulate, where you can add more steps or you can add more cardio. It's not the same thing. So if someone's been getting 6,000 steps per day and they're doing 30 minutes of, we'll call it incline treadmill, and, their food is, not too high, not too low yet. I think the lowest hanging fruit there, the easiest variable, the least fatiguing variable to change would simply to just add more steps, bump the steps up from 6,000 to either 8 or 10,000.
The earlier you do that, the better as well, because it's a lot easier to get into the habit of doing that and understand when you're still eating a lot, like how I can move around more throughout the day and just get into that routine compared to when you're already feeling like shit and you're, in the deep end of a prep or just any cutting phase and moving around feels harder. And it's like, now I have to get in 5,000 more steps. What the fuck? How do I do that? But if you've already set that routine in place, it's just natural.
Exactly. Yeah, that's where I'm at, is I already have this routine where, I walk to the gym, do cardio, and I walk back. And that's for me to get my steps in. But I wouldn't consider the walk to the gym, which is 25 minutes and then another 25 minutes. That's not 50 minutes of cardio plus the 40 minutes of Stairmaster. That's my step count and then my cardio.
Yeah.
So
you're not exerting a lot of energy when you walk to the gym. It's just a nice little brisk walk.
Yeah, it's I'm not going at a very slow pace, but I'm not
stroll around the block.
Yeah, I'm going at like I got some caffeine and clean in me, so I'm walking at a decent pace, but I'm not I'm not considering that cardio. Like I'm sure my heart rate's going to be a little bit elevated, but that's not, like I'm not sweating. I'm not out of breath. That's not
Your heart rate's also elevated because you took Clen and caffeine too.
100%. That too. And that's a huge thing is
Yeah.
like heart rate isn't always really going to be correlated with caloric expenditure and what I would consider to be, cardio and how difficult it is, or effort. I think that's the best way to say it is
effort.
Exactly. Heart rate isn't going to be always correlated with effort or even how it looks. So like somebody with poor cardiovascular endurance, they could be doing a certain level of effort of cardio, or I guess we can call it a certain output of cardio. And for them, because they have, let's say if they have a low cardiovascular endurance, their heart rate is going to be higher versus somebody who's been doing cardio all the time, has really good cardiovascular endurance. They're going to have a lower level of heart rate doing the exact same thing as the other person. The person who has a lower heart rate from having better cardiovascular endurance is burning less calories.
Yes.
So it's also why you want to use that as a variable to change over time while you're dieting, is because your heart adapts, your body adapts, you get better at cardio as you do it. That's just something you have to continue to progress. Versus, steps, you could continue to progress that, but that's just taking out so much time in your day that people just don't really have, and they'd rather be able to put that towards cardio. And then also I do think that, again, like I was saying, there's the balance between all of them. If you're doing all of one or just a shit ton of one, there's also joint issues and soft tissue issues that can come with that. If you're doing a shit ton of any of them, walking, incline treadmill, stairs, you might start getting some ankle issues, knee issues, hip issues, versus if you spread that activity out to any of them, evenly. And if you're doing, a moderate amount of each one versus doing a shit ton of just one, you're probably gonna have less joint issues, and therefore it's not gonna negatively affect your training as much. So that's another reason to, use the step count as a separate variable as your cardio.
Yeah. You said that heart rate isn't necessarily indicative of effort. So just to expand on that, when you use heart rate can be influenced by other factors outside of the effort that's being given. So right now I take Adderall, I take caffeine, my heart rate is going to be much more elevated, but I'm not necessarily expending really any much more energy. I'm sitting here doing nothing, right? And then say I go on a treadmill now, I could be walking at a normal pace, but I could be at 150 beats per minute while providing literally no effort, right? So you have to take those things into consideration. But if it's not being influenced by other factors, which it can be like just due to hydration, how much water you're drinking, right? So if everything's fine and you just have a normal resting heart rate, the higher your effort you have, it's going to be relative to a higher heart rate. Mm-hmm. More effort will be a higher heart rate, but a higher heart rate in itself does not mean that you're giving sufficient effort at all times. Even if you're doing cardio that could have been previously influenced by something else that you did prior to starting that cardio. But like you said, there's adaptations that occur. So given the scenario where it's not being influenced by other factors, I tell my guys to stay within a range of around 130 to 150 beats per minute, around there. And at a point in time, there will be points in time where they need to adjust the intensity for it. It's just like training. It's progressive overload. The body has adaptations in place. If I do the Stairmaster at level 5 for 4 weeks straight, on the 5th week, it's probably going to be easier than it was that first 2 weeks, right? My heart rate is probably going to be lower. I have built an adaptation to that. So what do I do now? Progressively overload. I got to go to level 6. I got to maintain that same level of effort so that I can continue to expend the same or near what we would assume is the same amount of energy.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what I've had to do is, I started out when I first started the Stairmaster this prep, I was just doing level 3, maybe up to level 4. And, that was pretty good. And then just over time, I've gotten better at doing cardio, bumped up to 5. Now I'm doing level 6. And, I'm just becoming more of an athlete.
Yeah. It might also be why people need to do the Stairmaster, or other apparatuses of cardio, because I know that, for me personally, I think the majority of my clients, usually walking on a treadmill tends to be the fastest thing that people adapt to. And you can only go so fast that then you're jogging, then you're running at a certain point, which you can do. I don't really have anything against running. I think a lot of people just have poor running form, and that's
mechanics,
they have poor running mechanics, and they end up causing a lot of stress on their knees and their ankles.
They're also fat.
Yeah, they're also fatter. They're heavier. The heavier you are, the more shock there's going to be through the floor.
That's why I can't run.
But you can run. I always look back at like the golden era bodybuilders. I'm like, these motherfuckers ran all the time. That's what I want in my life. Just go to the beach and run.
They adapted
Yeah.
their joints, their tendons and ligaments to be able to run versus if you just start right now,
Yeah.
it's gonna be pretty taxing.
I ran cross country when I was younger.
Really?
I did track, ran cross country. I was a running back.
I didn't know any of that.
Yeah. I ran a 4.540.
Damn,
I ran a mile in 5:45 or 5:43 or something like
that's
that.
pretty good.
Yeah, it was fast.
Now you probably get a 10-minute mile.
No way. No way. I should run a mile. Should go running. Should go run every morning.
If you want to.
It sounds nice, doesn't it? Doesn't it sound nice? Go down a Bay Shore, just run.
I've done, I've gone on a run like once a year, and
Once a year.
yeah, and
You're over it.
yeah, it's just it fucks up my knees and my ankles, and it's just like my lower back.
Go to
And,
the track.
yeah,
Doesn't it sound awesome? Every morning. Imagine when you met at the track every morning at 7:30. Just fucking.
that'd be great if I could actually do that.
That'd be lit.
Yeah, but
That could be the move.
I was thinking about swimming actually,
Swimming is crazy.
like laps, as like
That
cardio.
actually does bring up a good point. What was I just saying before this though? Oh, the
Heart rate.
level of
Yeah,
of intensity. Yeah, because a lot of people will do this and they'll stay at the same level of mode, and they'll say, let's say we're doing Stairmaster level 4, or we're doing also. A lot of people don't need to understand that there are vast differences between these machines, right? A Stairmaster level 4 on one Stairmaster can be completely different from level 4 on another Stairmaster when you're going to different gyms, right? It's not always the same thing.
Treadmill
Right? So
too.
this is why you need to be looking at your heart rate and the amount of effort that's actually being given, not just at these arbitrary numbers that are on the fucking machines. And if people will stay at these numbers for the entire duration of their fat loss phase or cut, and we're continuously trying to drop food or do this, but over time they've acclimated to these activities, so they're expending less energy over that time. It's like you naturally start to move less, so that's why we have that baseline of non-exercise activity thermogenesis. We need to continue to increase that cardio activity so that we can continue to expend enough energy.
Another thing that goes into heart rate versus effort is when you're tired, your level of effort, your perceived level of effort is going to be higher. But if you're doing, let's say, the same level of effort as before, but you're more tired, you're going to have less output and a lower heart rate and burning less calories. So that's another reason to track your heart rate while you're doing cardio, is just for that consistency aspect of, even if you're tired, you got to keep up with it. Or even, if you're using the same exact machine or same, brand and, type of machine for cardio, that's another way to track it is, if you're doing, a level 6, 7, 8, 9 incline at, 3.5, whatever speed on this machine, then keep doing that exact, those exact numbers. But if you're going from, one machine to a different machine because the other machine's taken for whatever reason, that would be a good reason to track your heart rate, just so you know roughly what is your level of effort, or at least what is your level of caloric expenditure, regardless of how you feel that day too.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still burning the same amount of calories.
Yeah, but this is just an imaginary number we're thinking of, because again, those numbers on those machines don't mean anything, and people will look at. I've seen coaches go off of using burn 200 calories during this cardio session and then use the fucking machine. Those things are not accurate at all. That's an incredibly inaccurate and ignorant way to program cardio for somebody. I don't know why anybody would do that. So people will do it that way, or they'll look at it as the whole distance thing, right? When we're looking at cardio. Again, we're looking at the amount of effort that's being given, and we're using time durations. How much time are we allocating to this amount of effort that needs to be given? Not the distance, not how many calories did I burn according to this machine or according to my fucking watch. Heart rate we use as a metric to estimate the level of effort, but you need to take into consideration the other factors that can influence that. But the distance thing, where people are like, well, I could just walk 3 miles, or I could run 3 miles, and it's gonna be the same thing. It's not, because it's not a 1-to-2 ratio where running is now the double amount of effort as walking is. There's a huge variance between that. Again, comes back to that individual context. What is their cardiovascular endurance like? How heavy is that person? What is their composition like? How much muscle mass do they have relative to fat? Because that also influences all this as well. What terrain are they using? Like, it's not just walking to running. It's, walking and getting steps into anything. A pace walk on an inclined treadmill, or just a pace walk in general versus walking normally, or a walk versus using a recumbent bike or a fucking Stairmaster. Like, these are not 1-to-2 ratios where it's just about, if I do this distance walking versus if I do this distance on a Stairmaster, it's going to be the same outcome, because that's never going to be the case.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think also another thing with looking at, I forgot where I was going with that.
Distance?
I mean, yeah, calorie expenditure. I think there could be some use if you're, if you're coaching yourself and you just want another metric to look at. I don't think it's a good way to go about it, but I could see the application being, if you're using the exact same cardio machine and you also want to, make sure that you're progressively overloading in cardio, looking at, the calories burned or the distance that you went, it's not going to be accurate, but it can be precise, which means it's not going to tell you burn 300 calories if you burn 300 calories. It might tell you burn 300 calories if you burn 200 calories. But over time, as you continue to progress it and you're, let's say adding in, whatever, time, effort, speed that you're going, it can at least, tell you if you went a further amount of time, did you actually burn more calories? I think there can be merit to it for some people, but I wouldn't recommend it. But regardless of that, forgot you were saying something I was going to say.
Distance?
I don't remember. Brain's all fried right now.
From the coffee?
It's just everything.
Everything.
Yeah.
Overwhelmed?
Fatigue.
Mental fatigue?
Yeah. Leg day yesterday and then HIIT and then fat burners, and I did cardio this morning. I had 45 minutes on the incline treadmill for my day after legs. So
do you use an actual fat burner or just drugs?
What do you mean?
Like, do you use like a supplement
fat burner? I have one, but I don't use it. I shouldn't say that, but yeah. A certain company sends me a fat burner supplement, a natural one. I've tried it, and it's basically just caffeine.
Really?
It's caffeine with like 5-HTP to make you feel a little bit better, I guess.
You should use Burn HD.
Why?
It just makes you sweat a fuck ton.
Interesting. Oh, I'm about to throw in oral L-carnitine, L-carnitine L-tartrate.
You're gonna use oral L-carnitine?
I don't want to inject more than what I'm injecting.
So I feel like it's not even worth it to use the oral L-carnitine.
I mean, in my pre-workout, my pre-cardio drink, normally I have 10 grams of glutamine and 1 scoop of EAAs and 1 scoop of Relight. And I might as well throw in like 3 grams of L-carnitine powder. Or maybe it's pills, I don't remember. But might as well, because I'm not gonna stick to injecting it. I could, but like I'm already injecting twice in the morning, sub-Q. I'm doing growth hormone and then the rest of the peptides in its own syringe. And then I inject almost every day steroids.
Pincushion.
Yeah. So it's like to add more to it for the benefits that L-carnitine is going to bring. It's like,
that's what I was saying. I feel like it's not even worth it to use the oral L-carnitine.
I feel like if anything, it's sure there's the potential that it increases TMAO levels, but like, how bad is that really going to be if I'm already, taking a bunch of things that already mess with my heart health?
What is it, like 5% is bioavailable?
It's like 10 or 15 or something, but like it's more L-carnitine that I'm already taking.
More steak.
No, it's more calories. I eat steak once a day.
Trade off more calories for more L-carnitine and creatine.
Could. Well, I guess, yeah.
I had a swimmer who, I think this is due to the fact that he was a swimmer, is he has low blood pressure and very low heart rate, and he needs to be on a super high level on a Stairmaster to even get to like 130 beats per minute. It's
because cardiovascular endurance is so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And that's like right now, me doing 45 minutes on the incline treadmill, it's definitely difficult. Like I'm sweating, for most of it, out of breath, but like it's nothing compared to the stairs. And like, people also don't realize that like if you're wondering why you're not losing body fat and you're doing a bunch of incline treadmill, but 0 Stairmaster and your food's already low,
get on the Stairmaster.
Try doing the Stairmaster. Like, that's what has always worked best for me is doing the Stairmaster. Like I'll just start sweating literally like 2-3 minutes into it. And
stairs are fucking hard. It's the hardest mode of cardio that you could do.
Hardest, machine, yeah. There's wrestling and shit like that.
Apparatus equipment, cardio.
Equipment. Swimming. I was thinking about probably starting to like swim laps. There's
where the YMCA,
the JCC, Jewish
camp?
No, Jewish Community Center.
Jewish Community Center.
Yeah, it's like it's down the street. Yeah, I used to actually. All Jews are allowed. I mean, I think everybody's allowed, but yeah.
Do you have to like prove?
No, I think anybody can sign up there. You just have to pay whatever monthly fee it is, and they have like a whole bunch of amenities.
So you could be like a Muslim and go in there.
Probably, but I don't know why you want to go. It's not like a Jewish place. It's like a place where like it's not like, the Hasidic Jews that are, praying all the time, that are there. It's more just like people like me, like happen to be Jewish.
So it's like a Jewish YMCA?
Basically, yeah. They have a gym there. It's like a YMCA type of gym. Bunch of lanes of pools. They have basketball courts, tennis courts, things like that. I haven't been to this one, but the JCC I used to go to in Arizona was, pretty nice. Went there for preschool and went there, throughout my life.
I want to go to Lifetime, but it's not worth it.
Already spending a shit ton of money on gym memberships. I have fucking 4 gym memberships right now.
And MI, Champs, that's already, MI's $200 a month. This one's 180, so that's already, what is that, 380?
Was it 180? I thought it was like 140.
No, it's 180.
Damn.
So that's already 380 in gym memberships, and then the other one is 75
for
so
Optimum.
Yeah, so that's what fucking.
I pay 69 for that.
You fucking yeah. Fucking what is that? 455 times 2 actually, because I pay for hers as well.
Yeah,
I pay for her membership. So what the fuck is that now? That's
900.
already 500. Fucking
900.
no, 500.
You said 450 times 2.
No, 455 because Optimum is 75. So.
Oh, she doesn't have MI40 or Champs.
No. So that's
Okay.
150.
Yeah.
150 plus what?
Plus 380. Plus 400. So that's 530. So 530
plus Powerhouse, which is I think 30. But like I'm paying $560 a month in gym memberships.
I'm paying the same thing because Metroflex is $50 a month, and then Optimum is $70. So that's $120 plus the other 2. But MI40 is $215 for me. I don't know if
probably tax. I don't know.
Yeah,
probably just tax.
I looked at it and it was like $107.50 every 2 weeks. So
I'm paying $575 maybe. I don't fucking know. That's crazy. That's ridiculous.
Some people pay $10 a month for gym memberships, and that's
that's not a thing anymore. I think Planet Fitness got rid of the $10 a month.
I think EOS is $10 a month.
Have you been to the EOS over here?
No.
It's not bad. All right.
Yeah, there's a million EOSs in
None of
Arizona.
these gyms have saunas. I need a fucking real sauna.
Planet Fitness doesn't?
I don't know. I haven't been to Planet Fitness. EOS does.
My 40 has the fake one.
I don't like those ones. I hate I hate those fucking red saunas, whatever they are.
Yeah, red light
saunas.
Yeah,
a real sauna with rocks in it.
Yeah,
rocks and it just feels different. It feels way better. You walk in there, it's hot. The other one I gotta wait for it to turn on. It's gotta boot up like a fucking robot, and then there's like nothing in there. I feel like I'm being fried from inside out instead of just like walking into heat.
Yeah,
it's not the same.
I used to have one at the first gym I ever went to, Mountainside. If you ever went there in Arizona,
I went there a couple times. Yeah.
Yeah, they have big saunas there, and Vasa too. They had big ones. That was good.
Should you get a sauna?
I had a sauna company reach out to me and said they were gonna send me like a little shitty indoor one.
You get one in the backyard, like an actual fucking rock.
I
think they're called dry saunas.
I've seen a good one on Facebook Marketplace for crazy cheap. I just didn't get it.
You can get them for like $2,000-$3,000.
Yeah.
Sauna partner with the sauna company.
Yeah, exactly.
TikTok shop sauna partner.
That'd be sick. Imagine shipping that. A whole sauna.
I mean, I've seen people that have it.
Yeah.
Dave had one when I went to his house. I think he had to build it. I wouldn't want to build it. I'd probably just hire somebody on TaskRabbit to build it.
Yeah. That'd be pretty.
I know what you'd
big
do.
Project. I'd build it. I'd build everything.
Should we touch on fasted cardio?
Yeah.
The benefit, should we get into?
I mean, there's a reason why I'm doing fasted cardio. A little bit of post-workout cardio, but mostly fasted.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people think that there's no difference between them. It's all just about the energy balance. I hate how people do this shit and they try to disregard things just because they don't understand the actual context of how it would be in a prep setting versus the general population, and act like the physiology just doesn't matter and it's just about these fucking basic simple rule. Oh, it's all about just if you're taking this amount of calories and you do fast cardio this time, sure, you'll have higher fat oxidation at that point in time, but you're still going to be intaking the same amount. Your energy is going to be the same. It's like it's not that simple, especially when we're talking about an actual contest prep setting where all these things matter, like the fat oxidation, the glycogen, where it goes, how it's stored, like
right. Calories are going to be distributed the same, calories in, calories out to an extent. But nutrient partitioning is a whole nother thing where you can use more fat for energy. You can use more glucose from glycogen as energy. So that's, a huge thing that people don't even realize. And then, of course, talking about enhanced versus naturals, that's a whole nother thing. But even just with naturals, I think the main benefit of doing fasted cardio is to be able to prioritize your training and not let your cardio interfere with your training. Because if you're doing cardio right after your training, that's still great. You're still getting your cardio in. And I think everybody should be doing cardio. And if that's the only time that you can get cardio in, then do it post-workout, or bring something with you to the gym, like whether it's EAAs, whether it's a protein shake, and have that at the end of your workout, whether it's protein shake, have it after your workout. And that way you're at least, having something in your system before you do fasted cardio. But also if you just simply want to do fasted cardio, or not fasted, post-workout cardio after your workout with nothing, no nutrients.
So why would you do that though?
Why would I do post-workout?
Why would you eat before you do post-workout cardio? Because my thought process is this next best time to do it outside of fasted cardio would be post-workout, because you're also going to have lower blood glucose and insulin levels.
It depends on the person. So if your goal is fat loss and your primary goal is fat loss,
Yes.
I would agree. But if you're also trying to build muscle, if you're trying to in a bulking context, if you're someone who's trying to recomp, and you're really trying to prioritize muscle growth, or at least muscle maintenance, I think it would help with recovery to be able to get those amino acids into the bloodstream, to help with that repair process. Even if you just drink EAAs during your workout, I think that would be great. And then you just go train cardio or do cardio right after you train. I think that'd be perfectly fine. I don't think you need a protein shake or, carbs or anything like that between your workout and the training window. What am I even saying? Between the workout and the cardio. But there's the benefit of doing cardio where blood glucose is low, where glycogen is low, because then what's your primary fuel source that you're going to be actually using? Fats. So, and especially if cardio isn't high intensity, you're really going to be prioritizing more fats for energy. Just because in that aerobic state, not the anaerobic state where you're at a lower heart rate, by lower heart rate, I just mean, 60, 65, 70% of your maximum heart rate. So that's for most people, 120 to 140. Doing that level of cardio, post-workout or fasted, you're going to be using more fats for energy. The counter argument is, well, in the rest of the day, you're just using more carbs for energy. I do think that in reality, whatever is easiest for you to stick to is what's going to get you the best results. But if you have an option between doing it fasted, doing it post-workout versus doing it fed, I would choose to do it fasted, because there's the huge benefit of you're not going to have to wait a lot longer after your workout to be able to eat your food. Another thing is so this is where it depends on the person. For some people, they're going to be able to burn more calories if they're fed. And if they're doing cardio in a fed state, and they're simply going to just have a better cardio session, if, they're eating a very little amount of food, or if they're very sensitive to eating less food and they just feel really drained, if they have a high stress job, whatever it is, and they just don't feel like they're giving their cardio their all for whatever reason, and they just have a better cardio session after doing it after, one meal, after doing it, after however many meals, that's fine. You're still burning calories, and I think that's a great thing. But if we're talking about, what's physiologically best in a contest prep to be the best competitive bodybuilder you can be and get the most shredded you can possibly get, I think you should suck it up and take some extra caffeine, whatever stimulants you need in order to give that cardio your all. And
in a fasted state.
In a fasted state where blood glucose is low, and then also,
insulin's low.
If we talk about the enhanced side of things, that's really where you're able to cause more lipolysis in the fasted state, because insulin is low. Insulin is going to directly inhibit lipolysis. So if you're doing cardio, you're going to have lower levels of insulin, higher levels of glucagon, just because you're expending energy.
And insulin is what inhibits HSL.
Hormone sensitive lipase. So that's the reason why it's a very complex mechanism, but that's the rate limiting factor, I guess.
And that's what breaks down the triglycerides for
beta oxidation.
Energy. Yeah.
So big words.
But it doesn't matter. When you're enhanced, you can just take this even further. But even in a natural state, this is still happening. This is still beneficial, natural or not.
Yeah, and if you have a choice to do it fasted versus post-workout, I would do it fasted because there may be that benefit of over a 20-week span, you might lose more body fat and less muscle glycogen versus if you did it, you know, in a post-workout or, you know, in a fed state. You're still burning calories, and at the end of the day, that's what really matters. But it's the small details that add up over time of a long duration cut, especially if you're trying to get very, very lean. So I do think there's a benefit.
I think we should explain this more in depth. So what happens, like you said, you know, when insulin is higher in a fed state, which it's not higher when you're fasted, you're inhibiting HSL, which is basically inhibiting fat oxidation, the ability to use fat for energy. Now, why that matters is in that state. Hold on, I'm drawing a blank. My ADHD just kicked in.
This is a podcast of two ADHD.
My ADHD fucking podcast. In a fasted state, because your fat cells have what? It's two beta receptors and alpha 2 receptors.
Mm-hmm.
The beta receptors are responsible for stimulating lipolysis. The alpha 2 receptors are responsible for inhibiting it, slowing it down so that you don't expend too much of your fat storage, essentially, as this is evolution. It's a survival mechanism, so that we have fucking stored energy, right? So it has to go through the alpha 2 receptors first, and those are kind of what control what allows to get hit to the beta receptors, how much of it is used for lipolysis. Norepinephrine, that's what I'm referring to. Norepinephrine, that's what the alpha 2, the norepinephrine gets released, goes through the alpha 2 receptors. If we inhibit those through something like yohimbine. Yohimbine is the only thing that inhibits alpha 2 receptors, right?
That I know of. I mean, I'm sure there's a million drugs that do everything.
And clenbuterol attached to the beta 2 receptors.
It agonizes beta 2 receptors, and yohimbine antagonizes alpha 2 receptors. I think it's beta 1 receptors actually that clen agonizes. I think it's all three, but beta 3 a lot less. But anyways, yeah, clen's going to cause fat loss directly, and then yohimbine is going to remove the inhibition of fat loss. So it allows for norepinephrine to cause more fat loss. So if we look at it from an enhanced side, these things are actually, you know, real things that are happening that are enhancing fat loss faster. We can still somewhat replicate this in a natural by having, you know, norepinephrine, you know, elevated, having insulin low.
How are we elevating norepinephrine? Just by
effort.
Yeah, just effort, just get into more of a sympathetic state.
Exactly.
Caffeine
too, yeah. Depends on your definition of natural. Is it still a drug, right? So
you don't need, even if you just activity, you're just going to enter that state.
Yeah. So now, are you going to be able to lose body fat if you just ate a meal? I would say yes, but also you're burning through calories in general, whether that's from glycogen, whether that's from the triglycerides that are in your bloodstream as well, because that's also what's happening is when you do cardio, you have the fat from your fat cells get released into your bloodstream. Those go to your muscle cells, and then those get
the triglycerides.
The triglycerides get broken down into glycerol and fatty acids. And then the fatty acids go through the whole process of producing ATP. That's the very summarized version of how you get energy to use for cardio from your fats. It takes a long period of time, but you're able to do it for a lot longer. That's also the reason why you're able to, do, a long period of cardio, like walk for, a long period of time or a lower intensity, but also that's the reason why it's generally better to not do extremely high intensity cardio all the time for fat loss, because then with that anaerobic version of cardio or that higher intensity, you need the immediate energy, which the immediate energy is going to be creatine phosphate, and that's going to come from, doing a set of 5 on, bench press, you're using a lot of creatine for that. But then if you're doing, a set of 12, if you're, doing, a fast paced cardio at, 180 beats per minute, you're just using more glucose for energy that you break down from glycogen, which is a faster process, but you get less ATP. So you can't do it for as long. And then a byproduct of that breakdown of glycogen into glucose is lactic acid. And that's, you have that buildup of lactic acid that tells you, let's stop, we're running out of glycogen.
What's not lactic acid? What is it actually?
There's a lot of byproducts. That's one of them in the Krebs cycle.
It's not actually lactic acid, though. What is this? Like the hydrogen or some shit? The hydrogen ion? We don't actually produce lactic acid. It's something else that people just call lactic acid.
There's, what is it? lactase dehydrogenase is the enzyme. I'm pretty sure we produce lactic acid.
It's called something else. I know, because all the science-based kids started freaking out saying that we don't produce lactic acid at some point in time. I remember this. That's not actually lactic acid. Everybody knows what we're talking about when we say lactic acid. But I'm just saying, like, it's not actually lactic acid. Look it up. You can see right now. But essentially, yeah. So, but in a natural state or enhanced state, if you do this cardio in a fasted state, you're going to have an advantage of lipolysis.
Lactate. I mean, humans produce lactic acid, also referred to as lactate. It's a byproduct of carbohydrate breakdown for energy. So yeah.
It's the hydrogen. It has to do with hydrogen ions? I don't fucking know.
I mean, hydrogen is
the burn. Like the burn that you feel isn't actually lactic acid. The burn that what does that come from?
Oh, so that has to do with the pH that you get from lactic acid, but that's generally H plus ions, so it's hydrogen ions.
Yes.
Something. That's what's causing the actual acidity, but that's from lactic acid. So you have lactate, which is lactic acid, and it's basically this molecule that has an extra positively charged ion, which is hydrogen, and then because that's acidic, that causes the acidic feeling, I guess. But anyways, what I was saying is I was saying a lot of things. When you're doing cardio in a fasted state, regardless of whether you're natural or not, you're going to be using
more fat for energy.
You're using more fats for energy just because insulin's lower, your blood glucose is lower, and you're going to be using both. You're going to be using glucose and triglycerides for energy. That's not something you can avoid. But the ratio of how much you're using is going to be skewed more towards fats. The argument is, then later in the day you're going to be using more carbs for energy. I think there's merit to that, but also I do think that if you're consistently building muscle while also doing cardio, it's a process that can happen at the exact same time of using more fats for energy, not using as much glycogen for energy, using other things to help with holding on to glycogen. So like L-carnitine, for example, berberine, carb cycling. So all these things that can help with keeping glycogen levels higher using less. I think L-carnitine is a great thing to use for that, just because you're using more fats for energy, less glycogen for energy. And so then that way you're able to over time transform your physique a little bit faster. But these are also like very nuanced points. I think the main reason has to do with training and recovery for a natural. For an enhanced person, that's where I think it matters more of doing cardio fasted where insulin is low and throwing in all these things that cause even more fat loss while you're fasted.
But if you're natural, you can still use Yohimbine HDL.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. So again, I'm saying that I'm a proponent of it. I think there's no reason not to, unless you can't because of work.
You could inject L-carnitine. That's still natural.
Yeah, those are the two main things that I have my natural guys use.
But it is very nuanced, and that's the thing that's frustrating, because people like to bring up these studies and say the same shit where you're going to use more glycogen. It's like, that's not necessarily true, because it all depends on the context, right? Where is this glycogen coming from when I'm eating fucking only 50 grams of carbs pre-workout and 50 grams of carbs post-workout? Like, where am I getting all this glucose to burn throughout the energy now, just through fucking what is it called?
Ketogenesis.
Not ketogenesis or protein.
Oh, you're talking about
glucogenesis.
Gluconeogenesis.
Yeah, but is that necessarily going to happen all throughout the day? Like, that's a pretty fucking...
That definitely happens in a deficit.
It happens in a deficit, but is that going to be now my main source of energy compared to fat oxidation?
No, fats would definitely be, a huge source of energy if you have body fat to use and you're already depleted in glycogen.
So where is this?
Where's the energy going to come from?
Where's it coming from? Now I'm only using glucose for the rest of the day now because I burn more fat in the morning during fast cardio. It's like, where is this coming from?
Right. So that's actually a good point. Is like later into a deficit, when you're lower in body fat but not shredded yet, and glycogen levels are very low, carb intake is low. that's where I think it really does make a bigger difference versus, someone who's 15-20% body fat doing fasted cardio. I really don't think it matters too much.
No.
But, if you're trying to get from, 9% body fat to 7% body fat, I do think that actually could make a difference just because you have the available resources for ATP. And if you're forcing your body to go through that exercise and you're already depleted in glycogen and you're doing it in a fasted state where glycogen is already lower, that's really where, throughout the day, you're probably going to be using more fats for energy than carbs versus if you were to do it, right after you ate a heavy carb meal, you used more of those carbs for energy versus the carbs that you could have stored as glycogen.
This is the thing too with the studies is everybody likes to cite these studies, and obviously studies are great. We all read fucking studies, but people recite them or regurgitate them as if anybody else can't do that and think that they figured something out, when the reality is that these studies miss so much context, right? We could sit here and do a fucking 12, 16-week study, fasted cardio versus post-workout cardio, but did we actually account for every variable? What was their exact diet like? What was this individual like? What is their composition like? What level trainee are they? These all go into the actual effect that we're gonna see, right? If you just took a bunch of normal motherfuckers and had them do fast cardio versus post-workout cardio, and they come to the conclusion, well, the energy, it's all about the energy balance. You're gonna burn more glycogen throughout the day. It's like, sure, did we actually do this on people who were getting to fucking 60% body fat? Did we actually do this on people who were carb cycling, who had a very controlled diet where their carb was very low and their protein was much higher? Like, all this is gonna affect the overall outcome.
100%. I was going to say something.
It all comes back to your entire approach, your nutritional approach. See, everybody's fucking low protein. Eat lower protein so you can have more carbohydrates. It's like, that's true to some extent.
I just did that actually.
To some extent, yes.
Yeah.
If it's going to help with your training, but now are we just going down to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight for the sake of more carbs? And then we can make the argument, sure, now you're going to have more glucose available throughout the day compared to maybe if we had a little bit less, your body would favor fat oxidation more throughout the day, which could give you a better end result. People just look at this, it all comes back to this fucking stupid idea. I don't want to say it's stupid, but it's just so oversimplified and such a surface level way of looking at things, is the calories in, calories out, and they don't want to actually think about physiology and what is happening at this point in time during the day. They just look at, this is what happened today, this is how much I ate, and this is how much I probably expended. And it's not that simple, especially when we're talking about getting actually shredded for a show. If you want to look at things like that, if we're losing 40 pounds to go down from 30% body fat to 15, you could probably make it that simple and do a great job, but that's not the same story here.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you're trying to just make a general weight loss transformation, I don't think these tiny little details are really going to matter. But on the other hand, it's like, is that how you want to go about your life?
You disregard everything?
Are you just trying to take the easiest possible route to get the minimum results? And if that's how you're going about it, that's fine. But also, how are you going about your finances? How are you going about your relationships? Like, is that like how you do one thing is how you do basically everything? It's not always true, but it definitely can be true. And so, I don't think principle wise it's the best way to go about it, just because of, like we just talked about, it's not as simple as calories in, calories out. It's the whole big picture. So same thing with if you're trying to just get away with the IIFYM diet, only tracking your step count and not doing any kind of cardio, only doing cardio, let's say after your first meal or, post-workout or whatever, that can work. It can work.
It's a mediocre approach.
It's a mediocre approach. Now, I will say the other counter argument that I think I said earlier, where like it depends on the person, is, and we can't necessarily like design a study on this, but if this is more of a coaching aspect, if somebody responds better to doing cardio, and this might also change as they go along their prep or their cut, but if they simply just burn a lot more calories from doing cardio in a fed state compared to doing it in a fasted state, and they just prefer doing it that way, you're going to get the most out of the athlete doing it that way. And if they're able to burn 400 calories from doing it after one meal or doing a post-workout or something like that, but they're only burning 250 calories from doing it fasted because they're so tired from whatever reason.
See, but how do you even know that?
Rough numbers.
Yeah. It's imaginary numbers.
Level of, like, you can tell, like, if you're pushing cardio hard versus...
Basically, if you see them making better progress.
Yeah, and if they tell also like you can tell within yourself if you have good introspection, you're high enough level athlete, been training for long enough, and like yourself, if you just know that you get a better cardio session, you get a lot more out of it if you just do it with more food in you. I think for the majority of prep, up until you're 6 weeks out or whatever, like I think that's fine. You're probably going to burn more calories over time, but then I do think to get to those extra lean levels of body fat, most likely, depending on your starting point, most likely you're going to want to be doing fasted cardio just to preserve your training while also getting to those uncomfortable levels of body fat that are very difficult to get to unless you're doing, you got to do extreme things in order to get extreme results. So not to call fasted cardio extreme, but it's probably more difficult. It's a little bit more extreme than just doing it post workout or doing it after you ate some food. But that's probably going to be your best bet if you're starting to add in cardio. But again, it comes back to your training, being able to do your cardio, eat 2-3 meals, whatever, and then train. And then not have to do cardio right after, and you're able to give your full effort in that workout, knowing you don't have to do cardio right after. That's the main reason why I would do fasted cardio. And you get to start your day off, on a good foot, literally.
Sets the tone for the day.
Yeah.
That's another thing, too, is people like to disregard that as well. Act like that's not a factor. I guess maybe for some people it isn't, but I feel like the majority of the time it does have a positive impact on how the rest of the day is carried out. It's the same concept as you wake up and make your bed in the morning, even though it's a lot more effective than that. You wake up, you get something done, and that carries over to how you execute the rest of your day. I've also had multiple people argue that, well, if I do fasted cardio, I'm just gonna move less throughout the day, and I feel like that's a retarded thing to say.
That's what the step count is for. That's literally what the step count is for. Yeah. It's just you don't move less throughout the day.
It's you just being lazy.
It is. I've thought about it myself because we get lazy thoughts sometimes of like, okay, I'm working really hard, I'm really tired. Is there a way that I can reduce fatigue? And so this was my thought process, was like, well, I fucking hate having to go do cardio sometimes in the morning when I'm fucking, either not feeling like doing it, or I'd much rather work, and I'd much rather, get up and just go straight to my computer and work for 2 hours. And so I thought about it. I was like, well, I could, maybe move my schedule around and, train a little bit earlier and then do cardio. And it's like, I'm just not going to want to do cardio later. And it's the lesser of two evils to just get the cardio out of the way first and then just be able to just train later. And then that's it. Enjoy the rest of the night. And so that's, the way that I like to structure my day is get the bullshit out of the way first, then eat food. Then I get to train, and then I get to, chill out, go to bed, and then just do it over again. And that's what's worked best for me. It's what works best for a lot of people.
It's an uncomfortable habit. I think a lot of people kind of also try to disregard it because they haven't gotten to that habit. And at the same time, right, if it doesn't work with your schedule, it doesn't work with your schedule. You shouldn't be sacrificing 2 hours of sleep just to get up and do cardio if you don't have the availability to do that, and you have to be at work at 8 a.m. every morning. Like that might just not be in the cards.
Exactly.
Do this with the cards to your dealt. But at the same time, it's like a lot of people just don't even want to make the effort to get up and go to the gym and do cardio and try to do that fasted session, or they'll do it for like a week. And it's obviously like you need to build that habit over time. It just becomes natural. Like brushing your teeth is just a natural thing that you do, and it's not, it's not really anything. That's how it happens to the prep. You wake up, you go do cardio, but at first it's like, oh shit, I got to fucking, this sucks. Like I got to do this, right? And it's getting past that point, because the initial point, especially if you're not really doing it with the intent of getting into a prep, you can really justify it a lot more, which is reasonably so. Like you don't necessarily have to do it, but it could help you in the long term, pennies at the dollars, and it could just help how you execute the rest of your days. So people will just justify it at that first initial phase of them trying it out and be like, oh, fuck this. This is just, I would rather just wait to do this later because it's hard. It's inconvenient. But
right. And I do think, it could be perfectly fine for most people to just, if you're not in a contest prep and you're just trying to, maybe you're on a cut, maybe you're on a bulk, whatever it is, like just go to the gym one time. And if you have a job that you work, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever, like to get as a natural also, like to get that extra little 1% potential fat loss, or, the other benefits that we're saying with, the benefits to your training, benefits to your day, whatever, like if it's really going to mess with your sleep, or if you can't, fit it into your schedule because of work, or if the gym is, an hour and a half away from you, the closest gym is, well, you could also just buy a treadmill.
Hour and a half away from you. What the fuck?
I mean, some people live far away from their gym, but you could also, another hack, another trick is simply buy a treadmill or buy a spin bike or buy, whatever.
Buy a gym.
Yeah, buy a gym, have it in your house. No, I've always, whenever I've been in a cut, I've always had a treadmill at my house, and it's very easy to just find one on Facebook Marketplace.
White privilege.
You just like you don't have to buy $1,000 treadmill. You can.
You can get them for like $200.
Yeah,
Marketplace.
I got mine for it's either 150 or 200, and it's a pretty decent treadmill. It gets the job done. It's not brand new, but like it's not broken or dirty or anything, and it works. And like I spent 150, 200 bucks. I think it was 150, and that's it. Don't have to set it up or anything. So like you can make these things happen. And if you can afford, your food, you can afford a coach, you can afford supplements, pre-workout, steroids, whatever it is, like you can afford $150, $200 treadmill to make it actually something you can stick to and do faster cardio rather than having to go to the gym. But like I said before, if you work, really early in the morning and you work, a hard day, physical labor, whatever, and you want to do cardio for the heart benefits or, mental benefits, whatever, or you're cutting, you're still burning those extra calories doing it post-workout. Nothing's wrong with that. But if you have the freedom to be able to do it fasted, I do think there's extra benefits with that.
There's also the aspect of in an off season with appetite too. If you're somebody who struggles to eat in the morning, right? Doing fast cardio, you will probably be substantially hungrier after you do that, and it'll be easier for you to get food down.
Funny enough, yesterday after I did HIIT cardio, which was, post-workout, completely against everything we're saying, but I was way hungrier after doing HIIT cardio. And I think it's because my heart rate got way more elevated than like it does from, like moderate intensity, which like my heart rate's still pretty elevated from doing Stairmaster. But for whatever reason, doing HIIT cardio could have also been just because it was post-workout, it was after training legs, could have also been that reason. But it made me think like, what if doing like a shorter duration, higher intensity, cardio session first thing in the morning while bulking, that might even, be a great idea just for the appetite benefit versus running or, whatever, versus just, going on a walk. I do think going on a walk is a great way to start your day. It's not going to take too much energy. It's a good way to reset your mind. But also if you're really struggling with appetite and going on a walk or doing some sort of low intensity, steady state cardio first thing in the morning isn't actually helping your appetite, try giving, a little bit of HIIT cardio. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, something, very simple to just get your heart rate up, get it back down, get it back up, get it back down, first thing in the morning. That might really speed up your appetite.
Well, let's talk about that before we wrap this up here. Is why we would utilize HIIT cardio maybe instead of a lower or moderate intensity state, or just add that into addition to that, right? So you're doing it post-workout on legs now. I've touched on this briefly in the post that I've made. We have the whole concept of EPOC as well, which I mean that's going to apply to all activity, but more so with higher intensity activity. Yeah, which essentially just means that following these activities, you're going to have a higher resting metabolic rate, meaning following even like an intense leg session too, right? Or just when you're doing sprints or running, you're going to continue to burn more calories for an extended period of time following that. Now, how much will that account for? Again, there's no way for us to know. There's no way for us to accurately track that, but we can assume that it will be burning some additional calories. And how much more is also going to depend on the individual context, their cardiovascular endurance, how much effort that session actually took, right? If you're, 250 pounds and you just did sprints for 15 minutes, you're probably going to have a higher EPOC effect than some guy who's 150 pounds and is a regular track and field sprinter.
Definitely. And that's also a reason why step count isn't the same as cardio, because after you go on a 20-minute walk, or if you were to split that up and do a 10-minute walk after 5 of your meals every day, that's 50 minutes of walking, and it's just a step count. It's just non-exercise activity thermogenesis, even though it's the intent of getting more exercise than if you were to just be laying down or sitting down. That's not cardio. And another reason for that is because of what you just said, which is EPOC, or exercise-induced post-oxygen consumption, I think is what it is.
Your body has to work harder too.
Yeah, and so option. How out of breath are you after a 10-minute walk 5 times a day? Versus if you did 20 minutes of pretty intense cardio, you're going to continue breathing heavy, continue consuming oxygen, continue burning those extra calories, continue having that faster heart rate beyond just the duration of cardio that you did. So that's another aspect of what makes cardio is what happens after the cardio that doesn't happen with NEAT. So that's, you know,
You're also gonna have higher fatigue with the higher intensity interval session as well.
there's that. You can't be doing, you know, hit cardio for all your cardio, especially if you're trying to, you know, prioritize your training and build muscle. I would not be doing hit cardio all the time, but I think there's a time and place for it if you're trying to either kickstart a cut and you're, you know, at a spot where, you know, you're at less risk for muscle loss.
Food is higher.
Food is higher, body fat is higher. You can get away with pushing cardio harder right out the gate. And I think hit cardio is a great thing to implement right from the start of a cut. Do you need to? No. Is it, you know, potentially a good idea if you're trying to get lean quick for a vacation, contest prep, photo shoot, whatever?
Or for somebody who's very time restrained too. If you're somebody who works, you know, long hours every day and
saves
you
time.
only have, you know, 30 minutes to train, 40 minutes to train, and how can we get in some additional expenditure on top of that? You know, you have maybe 15 minutes you can burn. You know, you're going to be much better off using those 15 minutes for high intensity interval training compared to a low steady state cardio option.
Exactly. And like we said already that lower intensity, you're going to use more fats, but in reality, you're using carbs and fats either way. But yes, the ratio changes. But if your only option to get cardio in is to either do a shorter duration or to not do cardio at all, or if we're going to say, you know, do 15 minutes of high intensity versus 15 minutes of low intensity when you need to be doing a lot more cardio, you might as well just get the 15 minutes of high intensity training or high intensity interval training, either one. And that's going to burn more calories and that's going to get you better progress. And it's not really going to negatively affect your training up to an extent. Now, if you're doing, 20, 30 minutes of HIIT, high intensity interval training every single day, 5 days a week, especially, you know, for a long period of time, you know, months, or once you're already deeper into a cut and then you throw that in and you're doing a lot of it, that's where you're going to see a lot of fatigue from it. That's when you're going to be using a lot more glycogen for energy than fats for energy, which is the opposite of what we were saying with you doing, you know, moderate intensity fasted cardio. That's not something that I would generally implement. But for me right now, because I'm still 13 weeks out and, you know, I'm trying to really, you know, get lean quick so that I can be ready early so that I can reverse diet into the show, or at least, you know, be able to pull back a little bit on the cardio as I get closer to reduce the fatigue and, you know, decrease water retention, decrease cortisol, increase muscle fullness. I'm pushing it hard right now by doing the hit cardio once a week, right after I train legs. And that way it's not, you know, negatively affecting the next leg day. It's not really going to negatively affect my workout or my recovery. So that's a way to implement it, you know, once, even maybe twice a week. And, you know, I'm probably going to do it for 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, something like that. And then stop doing that.
I hope this isn't confusing people because I feel like we're going all over the place, but it's just important to understand that there's a lot of nuance to this shit and the context always needs to be taken into consideration. There's a lot of people who watch this that are really into bodybuilding, and there's some people that watch this that are just into fitness and, you know, want general cardio information, right? So if we're talking about, I'll just give like two scenarios here. If I'm talking about somebody who's trying to be a competitive bodybuilder or go into prep, a scenario that I would potentially have them do is fasted cardio, low or moderate intensity, steady state cardio for a duration of time. Obviously not even talking about their diet, have them track their daily step count outside of that to create a baseline of need energy expenditure there. And then if we need to add in additional sessions, we would do that probably through a second session of still low intensity, moderate, steady state, depending on what point they're in, potentially a second session, maybe high intensity interval training if they are restrained on time, or if they are just far out, they're not like super depleted, they have food in them, and it's a good way to just get an additional expenditure. We're gonna have that EPOC carryover effect. You could also, like, I know Phil makes Phil loves doing it after quad day, just for the pump aspect,
yeah,
which is a whole different conversation, but I won't get into that. So let's say that's one scenario. Now say if we're just talking about a guy that's trying to get in shape and lose weight and get lean, because these are a lot of my clients. A lot of my clients are just guys who, you know, they are doctors, they're dentists, or they're a surgeon, and they just want to get into better shape, have a beach body, right? This guy's working, owns a business, he has minimal time. This guy, I could have him do, we'll try to limit his training session, because he only has so much time, I might even make that training session all fucking supersets. You know, fuck all the optimal low volume shit like that. Doesn't matter. You could still build a great physique with doing really any type of exercise activity work, and we've seen this for decades. I don't even know why people think this isn't a attainable thing. You know, there are plenty of guys out there that have great physiques where they just do circuit training and shit like that. And at this point, this guy's trying to lose weight. I'm trying to get him to expend a lot of energy and get stimulus to the muscle in that same time frame. So I could have him do a higher intensity training session and then have him do, 10 or 15 minutes of sprint afterwards. He's in and out of the gym within 45 minutes. And he just got a great effective session in where he just expended a lot of energy. He stimulated the muscle, and he's got a sufficient diet on top of that to recover as much as needed, and then have him track his daily steps as well to create that baseline. So these are two entirely different approaches that are both effective, just depending on the context for that individual, and there's the nuance that goes into it. People would look at that scenario and be like, this is not optimal, but that could be entirely optimal for what this guy needs to do and what is available to him, what his goals are, and just that situation,
It's optimal for him.
Yeah.
People say, well, what's optimal? It's like, depends on what's optimal for you, not what's optimal for everybody, because even like studies aren't on you. They're on a group of people that might not even be your demographic. And also when it comes to what's the result of a study, that generally has to do with a bell curve, where in a bell curve, you have people at the outliers, and then you have the majority of people that fall under the bell curve. And then you have other outliers where if we're talking about, what's the best way to train, some people respond a lot better to this type of training where it's the outliers, where it's the supersets, whether it's, whatever kind of training. And then some people respond better to this style of training, where majority of people respond better to a certain style of training. So that's a huge reason why you shouldn't just listen to studies to dictate how you go about all the variables, cardio, diet, training. Look at what's actually happening to your body. Try something. You could try what the studies say, see how you respond to it, but then don't take that as scripture. That's not be all end all for every single person. That's based on a group of people that isn't you. So for that surgeon who can only work out 45 days or 45 minutes a day, just because the science says you have to train an hour and a half, train, 4 to 6 reps per set with 1 RIR, like all this bullshit. He sees that and he's like, well, I have to train that way, right? And if I can't train that way, then I might as well not train at all. And so then he's not going to want to train. He's not going to want to do cardio because he can't fit it into his schedule. Then he's just not going to see any progress. So,
unfortunately, due to some technical difficulties, specifically on my end, the podcast was cut short 10 minutes. The roadcaster here had informed me that I had 9 hours of storage prior to starting this recording, and somehow an hour and 40 minutes took up all of that. I'm not sure how that happened. I'll have to do some investigating to figure out. Or if any of you guys are tech savvy and understand the roadcaster equipment and why it would do such a thing to someone like me, please let me know. Drop a comment down below. But nothing important was really said in those 10 minutes. Just more yap. I think everybody gets the general message here. Nuance and context matter. NEAT isn't the same thing as cardio. Getting steps in, cardio can consist of getting steps in, or it may not consist of getting steps in. Getting steps in may be cardio, or it may not be, just dependent on the context of the individual and why understanding these things actually matters, so that you can have more control over variables, understand why your progress is moving the way that it is, and knowing how to adjust accordingly. So I think we covered all the bases pretty well here. I don't think there's anything left to say, but thank you for tuning in to another episode of Brass Tack Bodybuilding, and we'll see you next time.